Peter Chrisp has spent 20 years in the engineering, manufacturing and pulp and paper industries. Before returning to New Zealand as CEO of NZTE, he was the General Manager of the Tasman Paper Mills in Kawerau. He moved to headquarters of Norsk Paper International Oslo, where he had a global role as Senior Vice President covering business in South America, Asia, the Middle East and Europe. His final job before coming back to New Zealand was as Regional President for Norsk Skog Australasia, based in Sydney. Please welcome the Chief Executive of NZTE, Peter Chrisp.
Kia ora tātou. It's good to see you all here this morning. As Phil says, full house, and that's, I think, a really encouraging sign of what is going on in New Zealand at the moment. I also want to just say thanks to Phil and to Catherine for the invitation here today. And just to acknowledge that the relationship and the partnership actually between Business New Zealand and NZTE is at an all-time high. We've done a lot of work to join ourselves together and really just attempt to add value to companies throughout New Zealand. By the way, we work together in a very joined up way. In a small country, it's very, very important that the institutions do that. So Phil, I think we're on a really good track in that way. So just presentation today, I could just really say just what Phil said. And that's, I guess, a sign of the partnership is that we are very strongly in agreement with what's going on in New Zealand at the moment. What I've done here is, in the last couple of years, I've been out, I've visited 36 markets and 132 companies walked in the door in New Zealand. And so what I want to do is just give some reflections of what I've seen in markets, then some reflections on what I've seen in New Zealand, and also a little bit of commentary on the forward direction. So let's go travelling. A bit like what Phil did, he kind of travelled around the world as well. So I'm just going to use a map. At the bottom of the map, you've just got a list of the countries, our offices actually around the world, and the number of New Zealand companies that we intensively engaged with in each one of those countries. So first of all, off to Latin America. And I get these comments from a mission that we had with the Prime Minister to Latin America. It was pretty grueling. We had 16 flights, 4 countries in 10 days, but really amazing engagement with the market. And we haven't really got a big commercial relationship with Latin America. It's only about $500 million. But one of the big takeouts from that mission, and there's a few people in the room that were on that mission, is just the extent to which Latin America is a food basket for the world. So the global demand for food is going to rise 80% by 2050. So the world needs to be fed, and a big part of that is actually in Africa. And then you look at Latin America, just take Colombia for example, 21 million acres of unused arable land in Colombia. Average size dairy farm, 15 cows. So there's an enormous amount of land and an enormous amount of productivity gains available. So for New Zealand, that means that Latin America is not so much a food company opportunity, but definitely agricultural services, agricultural technology, education. We had a very big education engagement with that country, farm services, and also a bilateral investment relationship with that country. So there's about 100 New Zealand companies in and around that market exploring opportunities. The other big takeout from that market, and I didn't know this surely when I went there, was the difference between the East and the West Coast. So on the West Coast, you've got countries that are liberalising, opening up, becoming more market orientated. When we got to Colombia, the first thing that President Santos said to us almost when we walked in the door, can we have a free trade agreement? It's not what we expected. Compared to the East Coast, for example, Argentina and Brazil, much bigger domestic markets, and Brazil in particular, inwardly focused, quite protected, and quite a difficult market to do business in. But of course the prize when you get there is much bigger. So really quite a big difference between the East and the West Coast. Then just head off to America. I disagree with everything that Phil said about that. It's still a crucial market, number 3 market for us, still an exciting. And if you look at our trade pattern, it's the market where we've got the highest number of value-adding companies. And just take, right at the moment in Washington, we've got 60 companies in and around Washington getting into the government procurement supply chain in Washington. Really high-tech spec companies. San Francisco is another important market there. So, and increasingly the growing relationship with San Francisco, it's a food relationship. In San Francisco, they love to love New Zealand. And that's quite a common sentiment around the world, particularly in San Francisco. But also the investment relationship. We've got venture capitalists based in San Francisco down making quite significant investments in New Zealand. But there's also quite a bit of thought leadership between San Francisco and New Zealand. So companies, Stanford University, IDEO, the Better by Design, all well connected. So San Francisco is a city that's growing in its significance for New Zealand. But just on the other side, I mean, America is the market where we find the growth targets and growth milestones are completed less in time in full. So it's still a reason, there's no easy market out there, but America is not the easiest market. So into China, once again, Phil's commented, just the stats on China. Last quarter, it was the #1 market for New Zealand. Annually, it's still Australia. So our trade's lifted 150% since the FTA was signed, but 300% increase in primary. So it really has fundamentally been a commodity increase in China so far. So with the result of the Prime Minister's mission when we were over there, one of the big takeaways was that the government-to-government relationship, meat plants aside, the government-to-government relationship is at an all-time high. And the phrase that President Li Keqiang said was that it's a model relationship between the two countries. It's a model of a relationship with a Western country. As Phil said, food security, food safety, but very big brand issues for us in New Zealand, keeping and holding brand. And clearly, I think as Annabelle will talk about as well, New Zealand's brand equity is rising quite dramatically at the moment. And that is as much an opportunity as a threat. So protecting our brand, marketing our brand, understanding our brand, really crucial. And China's really at the crux of that. The other big relationship in China was the investment relationship. We met with the Chinese Shanghai Entrepreneurs Association, and just the amount of capital they've got available to invest in this country. It's not just food, it's tourism capital, it's infrastructure capital as well. As the Prime Minister said when we were up there, China will transform New Zealand. We just don't know how. So it's also the country for us where it's the biggest delta between the level of companies interested and the number of companies making money. So we've got about 1,000 companies interested, knocking around, about 100 we think fully engaged, intensively engaged that we're working with, but a lot less than that actually being profitable. And that's really a lesson in patience and tenacity as much as anything else. Just going to jump over the ASEAN markets. Once again, they are, I think it's probably the biggest and fullest, healthiest set of trading relationships with ASEAN. But into the Middle East, growing in its presence. We've just put a new region into the Middle East. And interestingly, the Middle East are pulling quite hard on the government services, so like aviation services, education services. As they're building up their public sectors, they're looking at the integrity of the New Zealand public sector and saying, how can we access that? The other big part of that relationship is food security. They have to feed that population. Arab Spring is very much alive up there. And one of the things you have to do as a foil to Arab Spring is to actually feed your people. So they're looking for secure long-term food sources, and they see us as part of that. Europe, the only thing I'd disagree with what Phil said about that, but the thing about Europe as well is just, I had dinner with Graham Stewart of Sea Lords the other night, and he was telling me about the battle of the brands inside Europe at the moment. House brands dramatically rising. Germany now 85% house brands or private label. So if you're going there with branded products, keeping a hold of your brand as you go through the retail system. UK 40% house brands. So for us who are trying to go premium, get brand equity, then holding on to our own brands is really quite a challenge. There's a lot of thought. Australia on the way home, despite all the dilemmas in Australia, we still think it's the best first market on many or most occasions. We see it's an extension of the domestic market. The other big understanding for us is just how much the Australian economy is actually about the Chinese economy. 25% of the Australian output goes to China, and the mining sector has gone from 20% of the mining sector going to China to 60% of the mining sector going to China. So very much Australia has become China's mineral source. Okay, so that's a sort of quick world tour. Like I said last year, there's plenty of opportunities. The problem is not opportunity. There are plenty of opportunities. All the big mega trends in the world are just on our back doorstep. We feel them every day. Rise of the middle class, food safety, the impact of the internet, availability of capital around the world being quite a lot at the moment. So we feel all that. There's no easy money out there. If you think you're onto a business opportunity that's probably too good to be true, then it probably is too good to be true. So that's important. And I think, but for me, it's just the importance of understanding these markets. These markets are moving around all the time. They're not static. And so if you're going to market, just spending the time on market discovery. And market discovery is not what you do in New Zealand. Market discovery is what you do in market, what you touch, what you feel, who you visit, and how you immerse yourself in the society of a market to build up an understanding of how that market's actually doing. And then design of business models in the market, very bespoke, very customised business models. Sometimes it's distributors, sometimes it's JVs, sometimes it's franchises, agents, and the business model depends on the life cycle of the company, the product you're in, the market, the particular local situation. So we think we advise a lot of market discovery preparation work and very specific business model design. So let's just come back home, and you can't get past this. This is a picture of our export economy, and on the left is the GDP, on the right is the companies. And the big takeaway of that diagram, there's 14,000 export companies, but only 240 companies above $25 million export revenue. So we're an absolute peanut. And that means we always struggle with scale, because with scale you can do so much. Without scale, risk-taking becomes so much more risky. So that is just a fundamental dilemma we just have to understand. But despite the problems of scale, we are still quite positive. And I just want to, this next section, just go a bit through what's happening, some of the things we think are happening in New Zealand. So first of all, food processing. Food processing compound annual growth rate of 15% over the last 10 years. So this is our primary sector being transformed into value-adding products. And that's quite an extraordinary trend. You can see the big one there being infant formula, but there's so much else going on in that food sector. Then the food and beverage going premium and leveraging the New Zealand story. The photo I actually should have had here was probably Annabelle Langbein, who's sort of really championed the New Zealand food story and being a real global ambassador for our New Zealand food story. But the companies I come across all the time are going premium. This is Craggy Range. This is their new multi-million-dollar investment under Tamata Peak, just a spectacular environment. They bring people from all around the world, fly them into to the international airport at Napier, and they bring them down to this architecturally designed barrel room. He's got a 700-year-old table there, and he just goes through the New Zealand story and tells a story, a premium New Zealand story. Even our burgers going premium. This is Burger Fuel. They've actually taken the Middle East by storm. Can you believe that? It's a premium, and what I mean by premium, it's not just premium quality, they get a premium price, and that's actually what premium means. It means the price ultimately. They use built fresh Ansco beef, and they take it out. Now they are now in the way of taking that Burger Fuel proposition into the US market, taking Coles to Newcastle, which I think is a very cool story. And you know, and where that photo there is, that is actually their DJ unit in Auckland, where they broadcast music throughout all their stores globally. So what Burger Fuel are delivering is not just a built fresh quality food experience, they're delivering an in-store experience that's quite specific and has a lot of feel and ethos to it. So, you know, amazing story. Then, increasingly in New Zealand, a lot of food and beverage inspired by research and development. I'm very excited to see Callaghan Innovation enter the scene. They're going to get behind a lot of companies and just accelerate that innovation journey for companies. This one here is Sea Dragon. They take waste fish residues, I shouldn't call them waste, fish residues, livers in particular, convert them into omega-3 oils, and they've quadrupled their revenues in the last couple of years. And one of the premises here is full track and trace all the way through the supply chain. That's a very common story we hear, full track and trace. Let's just then jump to the IT companies. This is the other big sort of growth story that we're seeing. This is the TIN 100. And what the TIN 100 it's an analysis of the top 100 technology companies in New Zealand. If you look at the top 4 growth categories in the TIN 100, they're all digital in some way. And so the digital sector in New Zealand is growing. It's growing from a small base, but it is growing. And it's just, you just can't ignore that story. So a couple of stories. We all know Xero's story, and Rod Drew was telling us a couple of days ago, Xero now 1.2 billion market capitalisation. That's an incredible story. This one here is Serato, just down the road here. I think it's the coolest little company in New Zealand. These are people who are just nuts about DJ music. They've now got 90% of the DJ market in the US, 40% of the global DJ market, and they partner with Pioneer, and it's all code writing. So it's very, very bespoke, very specialised. And in the DJ land, these guys are at the top of their game. Another one, Dunedin, I found the other day, TrackMap, coming out of the primary industry. They've generated a 20% increase in the productivity from fertiliser application by using GPS technology to apply fertiliser. So in these stories, you could have a 10-hour presentation just on these IT companies alone, and it's really exciting. And the top line there, I've said ingenuity, resourcefulness, and creativity. And that really is, for people who don't know it, that is part of our DNA and part of our makeup. The story of this country is that because we've been isolated, because we're a long way from the world, because we're quite small, because we're quite young, we have got this ingenuity built into our DNA. Creativity abounds here, and now people are finding a way to commercialise that. And by the way, the dying city has got the fastest IT growth in New Zealand. Just sort of put that out there as well. And just to continue that story a bit more, it's not just IT, but we have a lot of sort of engineering based companies. This is Shape Tech in Christchurch, but you could say the same for Hayden and Custance and NDA and Scott's and Milmec, and they've all become very design rich, tailored, customised propositions. And what I loved about this one here was the values. I just found this on the wall in the factory. And I think it very much sums up at least part of the New Zealand story. The first 3 words, credible, honest, reliable. And we got lots of proof points to say that's actually true. And then that makes us good to partner with, and we are good to partner with globally. And the other bit you add in there is the practicalness and the resourcefulness that gives you your ingenuity. So in this Shape Tech, they just generated these values out of their leadership team, and I think they are just a good statement of some of the base values that we take for granted, but when you're overseas you realise this is a very, very important and special part of this country. The other thing we're seeing happening a lot more is companies working together. We've obviously got the big models, Zespri, Fonterra, have done a great job of building scale by collaboration and by working across large parts of an industry. But what we're seeing now is lots of companies banding together, so like people building brands, so Engineered Wood Products have built a brand called Bodyguard. People cooperating to get their supply chain, like the complexity supply chain, 15 wine companies going to the US. So they are banding together to share the development costs of building that wine supply chain into the US. Some companies that you'd think are competitors, but actually are cooperating as they go to market, so FPG and Scope. And some just sharing a go-to-market approach, Security Technology Alliance. We've actually got some very, very good security technology in New Zealand, so they're going out to security markets in the world as a group of companies to really advance a New Zealand-based security proposition. So it's really refreshing. It's something that we believe is important for a small country. It's not in our DNA to do this. This is counter DNA, but we think really important. So just putting together then the sort of global tour with the stories of New Zealand is what we would say is that yes, lots of opportunities, and we are limited by scale. Yes, we also have got a strong dollar as well, and that's clearly a big pressure on the whole system. But what we're seeing is enormous adaptability. We are seeing people changing their business models. And of course, everyone's getting their costs down, but that's just to stay in business. People are going premium and changing their business models to go premium. They're becoming design-led. They've been customising themselves, and they're drawing on this practicalness and this ingenuity. So, forward direction. There's a couple more slides to go. And first of all, I just want to talk about the government's approach. If you haven't seen this before, I think you probably should have by now. This is the government's business growth agenda, and this is a product mostly of Minister Joyce's leadership, but it goes across the ministers. And what he's done was stand in the shoes of a company and say, what does a company need to grow? And he's then designed a whole lot of initiatives all around the bureaucracy and all around New Zealand to try and get some forward momentum in each one of these pillars. And then he's put an overall light on the hill, as Phil talked about, going from 30 to 40% of GDP by 2025. And that's provided a great sort of a light on the hill, which means it's helped line up a lot of people who are really working in the area of economic growth. So for us at NZTE, this really helped us set our direction as well. So we've just taken the business growth agenda and we said, right, that's our instruction, that's what we've got to do. So for us, it meant we have to put New Zealand internationalising companies in the middle of our organisation and become customer-centric, like so many companies in this room are doing exactly the same thing. The three basic pillars is about growing individual companies. So we've got about 1,500 companies that we deal with, and we're focusing specifically in on about 500 companies. We don't just work with individual companies because we think there's a lot of value to be added by companies working together in groups. To do either of that, you've got to have services that add value. Services like, Better by Design, helping people with branding and design, beachheads, which are private sector advisors in market, international research, market access. And the good thing about Callan Innovation is they've come onto the scene. Increasingly, we're designing a service suite that's common between us and Callan Innovation. So companies come in and they go to where the services that adds the most value. To do that with any credibility, you have to have quite a big internal process of transformation. And like most companies, as they're trying to change their business models, you immediately come back to your people. So a lot of work with our people. It's the culture of the people, what they believe in, how do they go to work every day. And one thing that Rob Fife taught me was he said that in a service-based organisation, if your people are having a good day, they'll give the customer a better day. And that's a really simple but fundamental thing. So there's a lot of effort gone into giving the people who work in the organisation a better day, take away some of the obstacles and the hurdles for them to actually deliver the value to the customers that they really want to deliver and what they believe in. Also, it's been quite a big rotation, so we're now down to about 520 people. We've taken 311 out and put 248 back in. So we're now 87% from the private sector. So enormous amount of recruitment work, induction, training to build a common internal engine that can focus on customers. The other thing, the last leg, is really the digital platform. So we've had to rebuild the website, rebuild the internal engine, rebuild the search engine, the communications technology. Because one thing that we're very conscious of is we're sitting on an enormous amount of company lessons. We know the pain that a lot of companies are going through, so we would like to be able to give ourselves the technology that makes those lessons readily and easily shareable. So that's a big part of what that digital platform is designed to do. And the final thing is really a philosophy, and it's really good the way the public agencies are working together. There's good chemistry. With that light on the hill from the ministers, it's really got us aligned, and we feel like we're working for a cause, not an institution, and the cause is actually to grow New Zealand companies internationally. So those are just some of the base ingredients of our particular journey. So, and the final slide for me is that you can have strategy and direction and stuff, but I think to me what has been really missing across the whole system is implementation. So I love the Jack Walsh quote, you pick a general direction and you implement like hell. So we've really just had 2 years of very, very detailed implementation, right down, detailed, getting things done and getting things behind us. So, I mean, overall, I think it's been it's a great journey for the country at the moment. I really believe in that story that we're adapting, and we are, I think, we should feel quite optimistic about the world in front of us. There's definitely plenty of opportunities there. We're only limited by our own imagination to adapt our business models and get those opportunities that are definitely there. Thanks for listening. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.